Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another deck profile, and for today's video we're going to be doing an updated Tearlament list. Now, as far as this deck is concerned, we're basically going to be using both of the best engines available to us, being the Horus engine and the Fiendsmith engine, and somehow we're going to be able to cram it all into a nice, clean 40-card list. So, with that out of the way, let's jump straight into it. As always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup first, and as far as the Tearlament portion of the deck is concerned, we're basically just going to be maxing out on all 9 of the cards because that's all we have available to us, right? So, as a result, we're playing 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart, who on normal or special summon is able to foolish any Tearlament monster from your deck to the graveyard except itself. So, if you're sending a Tear Cache, you get to mill 2 cards. If you send any other guys, you're going to be fusion summoning, and this card just opens up so many different plays, as it pretty much allows you to go through either an Exceed, a Link, a Fusion, whatever you may need for whatever situation. So, yeah, gotta play 3 of it when you're playing a pure Tearlament deck. Then to accompany our 3 Reinohearts, we're playing the 3 Tearlaments Kashtira, who on normal or special summon is able to mill 3 cards from either your deck or your opponent's deck, but let's be real, you're basically just always going to be milling your own deck, and when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, is just able to mill 2 more cards, so a potential 5-card mill, greatly appreciated in a deck that enjoys milling. Then, for the 1 of tier monsters, because they're limited, we'll play the 1 of Tearlaments Scheiren, the 1 of Tearlaments Havnis, and the 1 of Tearlaments Merrli. Depending on if the proper conditions are met, each one of these is able to mill you 3 more cards, but the main power from them comes from being able to basically access the fusion monsters in your graveyard, right? Because if they're sent to the graveyard by card effect, you're able to fuse into whatever you have available to you at the moment. So, yeah, if you want a fusion summon, you have to rely on these. And that's it for the Tearlament portion of the deck. And then for the other cards that we're playing 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. It has quite literally 0 synergy with the deck as a whole, but we pretty much have to play it if you don't want to lose to the Mulch armies, which are unfortunately everywhere. Then for the Fiendsmith engine, which just unlocks so many other plays as well, we're going to go really basic. You got the 3 Fiendsmith engravers, the 1 Fabled Lurrie, which you're typically going to add off the Tract, and the 1 Lacrima, the Crimson Tears, which will be able to send the Fiendsmith in Paradise, usually either during your turn or your opponent's turn, just to give you like another layer of interruptions against your opponent. But yeah, that's so far nothing too crazy, really standard stuff. And then for the Horus engine, you got your 3 Imsety, Glory of Horus, and the 1 Hapi, Guidance of Horus, literally only here to make zombie vampire. But there are certain situations where you just want to leave them on the field in order to just put pressure on your opponent, or like maybe even go for like an easy OTK, right? Because they are pretty big and they are pretty easy to summon, provided you have the King Sark on the field. And then for the final monster in the deck, we're just playing 1 Mudora, the Sword Oracle, because we need some kind of shuffler to put back resources and just generally disrupt our opponents. Now, there are a lot of monsters that I normally would play that I opted to omit this time. You're not seeing Kashtira, Fenrir, you're not seeing Beast King of the Swamp, you're not going to be seeing any cute cards like the Strudo or Trick Clan or anything like that. I pretty much wanted to make this deck as streamlined as possible so that it can consistently do what it does best, which is just mill as many cards and just set up like irritating boards that your opponent has to deal with as often as possible. So we didn't really want to rely on those other cards that need a little bit more setup than most to be able to play the game. But even so, this is still perfectly solid for like a monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion. Now that we're on the spell and trap portion of the video, we're going to be playing only 1 card at 3 this time, and that card happens to be Primeval Planet Perlereino, which is basically the best starter in the deck, right? You activate this card, then you can add any Tearlament monster from your deck to your hand. It boosts all your Tears and Fusions by 500 attack, and when a Tear monster gets shuffled back into the deck, you get to pop a card. So, yeah, this card just does everything for the deck. And then for the 2 ofs, we're playing 2 Tearlaments Scream. So normally you'd see me playing this card at 3, but because we have so many different engine pieces, namely like the Fiendsmith stuff, I was kind of struggling just to fit in the 3rd one without going over 40. And I figured at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter too much, especially because thanks to the cards known as the Fiendsmith cards, we're able to go into cards like Pilgrim Reaper, which allow us to just mill 5 more cards if need be. Not that we're going to be doing that every single time, but the option is there. So we don't need to rely too heavily on Tearlaments Scream being on the field to be able to mill 3 more cards, but it's still obviously an incredibly powerful card. And then we also have the 2 King Sarcophagus, which is what we need on the field to be face up if we want to take advantage of the Horus monsters in our deck. Now for the 1 of spells, we're playing 1 Tearlaments Grief to special summon a tier monster from either our grave or our deck. And it also has like the added bonus of if it's like milled, right, you're able to add a banished Tearlament trap to your hand. And this is like one of those great resources that we have to be able to add back cards like Metanoise or Sulliek that we're typically going to be banishing off of our Tearlaments Kashtira. Then We're also playing Foolish Burial Goods to be able to send any of our spells and traps to the grave, and Foolish Burial to be able to send any of our monsters to the grave. Then, if we're playing the Fiendsmith engine, we obviously have to play at least one Fiendsmith Tract, which is pretty much just always going to be adding Lurrie in most situations. But that doesn't also mean that we're always going to be discarding Lurrie, right? Like, you can make some arguments for discarding a tier monster every now and then, or something like Trivikarma or Sulliek if you want to trigger their graveyard effects. But yeah, basically just adds Lurrie, and then the discard, it's up to you what you want to do with that. And for the good one of other spells that we're playing, the one Triple Tactics Talent to punish our opponent when they hand trap us, and the one Call by the Grave so that we have a little bit of resilience to hand traps whenever we draw it. Now that's it for the spells, and then for the traps, we're playing the 2 Tearlaments Sulliek, which allows us to negate our opponent's monster's effects on the field, obviously, and when it's sent to the graveyard, it searches out any tier monster. 1 Tearlaments Metanoise, which is the in-archetype Book of Moon, which, when it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, is able to add any tier monster from our grave back to our hand. So this is going to be pretty important, actually, at helping us get back cards like Tearlaments Kashtira, because we don't have access to cards like Totally Awesome anymore since Bahamut Shark got banned. And this is actually one of the few ways that we have to just recycle cards like that in general. So yeah, I got to play one of those. Then we play the 1 Trivikarma, which allows us to search our deck for any single Tearlament card. So or I guess more specifically, it searches any card that mentions Visa Starfrost, and that in turn means that it searches every single Tearlament card because they all mention Visa Starfrost. So you can get your Scream, you can get your Grief, you can get your Primeval Planet Perlereino, you can get Sulliek, you can get Metanoise, whatever. And then for the final trap, we're playing the 1 Fiendsmith in Paradise, which is what you're typically going to be sending off the Lacrima during your opponent's turn when you bring it back and then summon it off like Requiem again, right? So yeah, with that, that's the spell and trap lineup. Clean 40 card list as always, and now we can finally move on to the extra deck. Now when it came to constructing the extra deck for this deck, it was surprisingly difficult just because I figured we'd have a little bit more space with the banning of Bahamut Shark and the loss of Totally Awesome, but it was just too tight and I just could not fit all the cards that I wanted to. So as a result, we are going to be cutting cards like Chaos Angel and Dugaris, which you would normally see in Fiendsmith piles or in Tearlament decks, but don't get me wrong, they're still really good, and I could definitely find ways to fit them in if I really felt the need to. I didn't want to include them in this list. So as a result, we're going to be starting off with the Link monsters first, and the first one we're going to be talking about is Fiendsmith Requiem, which just cheats out your Fiendsmith monsters from the deck. We have 1 Moon of the Closed Heaven, which turns any 2 monsters into full Fiendsmith combo. Fiendsmith Sequence, which is literally only here to summon out Desiree past turn 2. We have 1 IP Masquerena, which is what you're going to be using to go into the SP Little Knight during your opponent's turn. And that's it for the Link monsters. Then for the Exceed monsters, we're playing 1 Time Thief Redoer, which is basically what allows us to cheat out a fusion summon, right? As the ideal material for this is either going to be Tearlaments Scheiren or Tearlaments Reinoheart, provided you have the discard in your hand for the Reinhardt to come back, as it detaches for effect, not for cost, so it will trigger those cards. And its other effects, just being able to take the top card of your opponent's deck every standby phase and just take a key resource from your opponent is also greatly appreciated, right? Because if you take a spell, you get to draw an additional card. If you take a trap, you get to return a face-up card on their side of the field to the top of the deck. And this card is just like a general nuisance that your opponent has to deal with at some point. Then that's it for the rank 4s. For the rank 6s, we're playing the 1 Pilgrim Reaper, which allows us to mill 5 cards. And it's still incredibly easy to make. So if your hand is pretty weak, you can just go straight for this guy. And hopefully you hit something off your 5 cards. And we're playing the 1 DDD Wave Hiking Caesar, which is what we're making when our hand is surprisingly strong, as opposed to like the Pilgrim Reaper. That's it for the rank 6s. And then for the only rank 8 we're playing, it's the 1 Zombie Vampire, which you're going to be using your Horus engine to go into every single time for the most part. And that's it for the Exceeds. And then for the Fusions, we're playing the 1 Necroquip Princess so that we can turn our Fiendsmith combo into a instant rank 6 every single time. The 1 Fiendsmith Desiree, which is like a pseudo-negate, but we're typically not going to be summoning this one, right? Instead, we're just going to send this off the Fiendsmith in Paradise to be able to interrupt our opponent when they decide to special summon. And then, if for whatever reason during turn 2 we don't have enough like gas to beat the opponent, we can make this card as like some kind of like extra insurance. Then we're playing the Super Poly targets in the form of Mud Dragon of the Swamp, Gurura Wings of Resonant Life, and Predaplant Dracostapelia. They're called Super Poly targets because that's what you're typically going to be using them in the traditional sense, even though we don't play it in the main deck. But even so, like you can still summon these out pretty frequently in this deck, even without it. And then for like games 2 and 3, I like citing Super Poly right now, I'm not going to lie to you. I just put those in, and then we have instant access to these, as Super Poly is honestly surprisingly strong into a lot of matchups. It's just pure Raizio where it's probably at its like worst, right? But and against everything else, that card is surprisingly decent. And then lastly, we have the one Kaleido Heart, which just allows us to spin cards back when it's special summoned or if an Aqua monster gets milled. If it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you get to reborn it and then foolish a tier card. This card just, it's the perfect boss monster for a deck like this. And with that, that's the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya!